about a year ago, I reached my boiling point. Too many historic houses were being demolished right before my very eyes. So I began an organization called Protect Our Past. And it's designed to motivate change so we can stop this trend of destroying our historical identity. You know, once it's lost, it's gone forever. And as someone said recently, all that's left is regret. So I have a panel here to discuss this issue. Would you please introduce yourself?
I'm Alan McClennan from Orleans, Massachusetts. And I'm a lifetime community planner.
Lisa?
And I'm Lisa Hassler. I'm a local realtor. I specialize in historic preservation, and I'm also the chair of the Historical Commission in Sandwich.
And I'm John Harter. I live in Orleans, and I'm currently serving on the Historical Commission. Built a house about 20 years ago, moved here full-time 4 years ago, and I like Cape Cod the way it is.
The way it is and the way it was. We want to keep the way it was the way it is. How about that? So I'm going to start with our first question. It's something that I often say to people. Did you watch the tower burn down at Notre Dame last summer? And if you did, what were your feelings? How did you react to that? Did that stir a visceral response?
Ellen, when I saw that, I had an instantaneous memory. I was planning director in Arlington, Massachusetts in the early 70s. 1975, the first parish moved to restore their fourth meeting house, which had been sitting in the same location since the town was settled in 1636.
Wow.
And 2 weeks before the 19th of April, 1775, the contractor was just finishing rehabilitation of that church, and he violated the contract terms and used an open flame. And within 1 hour, that church was gone. And within 2 days, all vestiges of that building were trucked out of town.
And it's gone forever.
Gone forever.
Wow. And so, should we care? I mean, I have a visceral response, but maybe not everybody does. Why should we care?
Well, I think we all have to care, because every time we lose one of those buildings, part of our history is gone, and the memory does not last. In Notre Dame's case, of course, there's a lot of building left, but in most cases, they're gone and they're in a dumpster within an hour.
Ooh. Lisa, have you experienced this?
You know, it was like a punch in the gut when I saw that on television, and I think it's true how fast we can lose something that's so iconic and so special and so loved. And I think, you know, for myself, I see it in the local community when we lose a historical home, and a lot of times people don't speak out until it's too late. You know, once it's under the wrecking ball, then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh my gosh, you know, what happened? Why didn't somebody protect that building? And then it's too late, because it can be gone within minutes. Something that has so much history and such a link to our past and to our ancestors and to who we are as a community can be gone in the blink of an eye.
John, you're new to the Cape, so do you care, or why, again, back to this question, why should our generation, your generation, the younger generation care?
The loss you're talking about was a horrible accident. It happened because of the violation of a very reasonable rule. That was an accident, and it's horrible. It leaves that an empty space is what I experienced. And sort of the ripping out of and leaving the empty space. But what bothers me more are the conscious decision to demolish or destroy. Both result in a horrible loss, but it really bothers me when we don't have a way to talk to the person who wants to rip my heart out.
Yeah.
And I believe that when we lose a piece of our past, it's not just history, it's the community. You use the word community, because I came to Cape Cod because I was attracted to the whole package. And if I believed that my town was going to build 3 brand new drugstores in place of 3 valuable historic homes, I would just be devastated. It's not that I don't want change. I don't want change that is disrespectful to those who came before us.
Oh, that's a very interesting point, that there's value to the people who came before us. In other words, there's value attached. You're placing value to history.
Absolutely.
Well, there's collective wisdom in our forefathers. You know, there's wisdom that was passed down over generations. And we are facing some really important challenges with climate change. And maybe we can learn from the past. How did they build? How did they site their houses? How did they, shed water from drip edges? I mean, there's just so many tiny details embodied in the built environment that we can learn from. And I think we need to learn from so that we can face those challenges that we have.
You brought up something really interesting, and that is there was a environmental design attached to the original building of historic houses. Alan, you've had a lot of experience with historic houses. How would you respond to that?
Well, as we think about climate change here on Cape Cod, I'm struck by the fact that very few of the original houses built here on the Outer Cape were built close to the water.
Yes.
They faced south,
Kinda smart.
they protected themselves from the north wind, and they realized that nature is a powerful force, and they could live with nature, but they designed their houses to respect that. So, as a fact, the oldest house on Pleasant Bay, not Bassing Harbor in Chatham, but the oldest summer house on Pleasant Bay was built in 1887. It's still there. It has survived all the gradual ocean bay water activity and so forth, but it was built in the right place and it respected nature.
Well,
and it served the purpose. I mean, I think we need to rethink what we need in a house. You know, the average size of a house in the early 19th century was 400 square feet. And now I think we see these two-story homes and, built maybe in the 1850s, the Greek Revival, and we think, oh, that was the average size home. But it actually was for multi-generational. You know, many generations lived in that same home. It wasn't just, a family of 4. And we somehow have destroyed so many of the little 400 square homes, or they were eaten up by being built around, that we've forgotten that for thousands of years, our ancestors did not live in huge homes, and we don't need to have such a heavy draw on resources. We can get the job done in a much smaller package.
John, you look like you have something to say.
Well, I'm thinking that buildings exist, and we worry about these buildings. Our concern gets raised when a particular building is threatened. But these buildings form a fabric, and there is a streetscape within which this building sits. And those houses, those retail places, have over the course of time found a place within their community, within that street. And you rip one out, you want something that fits in that space.
Yes. Yes.
And often in the 21st century, people are proposing things that don't fit. They're too big, or they're too boxy, or they don't have any sensitivity to the community in which someone wants to plop this box.
So many wonderful things have been said, and one of the things that comes to my mind is the what I call the TRex Syndrome. And that machine that's coming in and tearing all these houses apart looks to me like a T-Rex. And so when that happens, they're destroying what you were referring to as sort of the cultural puzzle of Cape Cod. I mean, we're talking about Cape Cod here, which has its unique historical identity, and I feel like that T-Rex is just ripping it apart piece by piece. And as I said earlier, not only well, one thing I want to say is that for me, that's wiping away memories. Memories that you've all identified as being invaluable to us as a culture, and we should be holding on to those and learning from them. But also, all that's left behind is regret. And that's, you know, I think of it. We started off talking about 2 structures that were burnt down. That was caused by fire. But now we're talking about man's decision to tear it down specifically.
I have spent time in my career trying to save houses. If their current use is no longer economic, can the use be converted into something else? And as part of that process has been a house that's endangered, picking it up and moving it. And, but the other alternative is the TRex syndrome. And I had a house at the end of my street in South Orleans that was the 3rd or 4th house on the property, but the family had owned that property since 1706. And as time went on, it had been passed from generation to generation. It had never gone through the Registry of Deeds. It had always gone through by probate. And at the end, the last person who was going to inherit it died too soon, and his brothers, who were from out of state, didn't want the property. I spent years working with those men then, and their mother when she was alive, measuring the building, figuring out what was there, what the liabilities were if you tried to restore it, and ultimately tried to set it up so that it could be picked up and moved. And we actually had a purchase and sale with another entity. We had the mover ready to go, and that entity got cold feet at the last minute. And a year ago, I was there when T-Rex moved in and took the chunks out of the house, and it's now gone. It's just a vacant lot. So it's a memory.
That's the Kendrick Sparrow house that you're speaking of. Yeah. So that leads to the question we are all asking ourselves: how do we save historic houses? What do we need to do?
Well, I don't think we can save them all, unfortunately. And I think when we're talking about houses that are in the flood zone that may need to be lifted or moved away from the shoreline, you know, some of them may be lost. And I think it's time that we have that hard conversation about documenting what's there. And, you know, like you did, we had to do the drawings, do photography, so that at least there is a memory that is archived that we can learn from. But there are so many that we can save, and I think that we need to, you know, step up to the plate. Like there was a movement in the 70s where preservation was, you know, was really catching on, and I think the pendulum swung the other way, and I'm hoping that it's starting to swing back now, and that we realize, you know, from our own experience what's being lost, and that we will want to save those things.
You know, people come to Cape Cod to come to the seashore, right? Well, they also come to Cape Cod because they want to come to Cape Cod, which is more than the seashore. People from Boston can get wet more quickly. They can find a beach closer to home. But people come to Cape Cod because of the feeling of Cape Cod. And that feeling of Cape Cod is not just the beach. It's the little historic town you drive through on the way to the beach. And people like this. They drive long distances and endure huge crowds in the summer to be here. It's the place, and the place is very much defined by the historic homes and businesses that have set up along the sides of our roads. People like this. I'm convinced that a lot of people aren't aware, aren't conscious of the value they place on the joy of going to Cape Cod that is brought by that little white cottage over there that's across the street from the place they always go to get coffee before they go to the beach. It's consciousness raising that I think is really important in our community. The guy who comes from Boston isn't going to do a thing to save the little white house across the street from where he gets his coffee. But I live in that town, and I like that little white house too. And so I need to help the people in my community appreciate what they love to the point where they're willing to take some action. Historic preservation is not about stopping people from living. These houses are here from the 1700s. People have lived in them. They aren't museums, and we want that to continue. It takes effort, as has just been demonstrated, a lot of effort in some cases, and sometimes to no avail. We have to be the ones who make the clarion call and tell our neighbors to be aware of what they like and love, and to spend some time, effort, and some money to preserve why we're here in Cape Cod.
You know, Ellen, sitting here looking across at John and Lisa, it suddenly occurred to me that Lisa and I have never met before, and we have something in common. Lisa's at the west end of the old Kings Highway District, and I'm in Orleans, and I'm at the east end.
Right.
And this is the oldest and largest historic district in the United States, Old Kings Highway. And I spent a hectic life in Boston and surrounding communities, and my wife was the same way. And when we needed to come to the Cape sometimes, and it's 34 minutes from the bridge to our house in South Orleans, we would get off and we would drive Route 6A because it was a way to understand Cape Cod. And this governmental intervention has preserved something that is unique to Cape Cod, and it's something very special.
So much has been said here today. I want to wind it up by letting you know that so many people point fingers at the historic commissions and say, why don't you save it? Why did you let that happen? Well, they just don't have the power to do it. They have demolition delays, but demolition delays are exactly what it says. They delay the demolition. They do not necessarily prevent it. It just gives time for people to work toward that prevention, which is hard work. Really, we need to be looking at the town governing bodies and say, hey, can you just improve the bylaws so we can slow down and stop the demolition of historical properties on Cape Cod? So it's something that you can do, but Protect Our Past is here to create this awareness, to motivate change. And the best way to do that, to find out more about us, is to go to our website, protectourpast.org. And there's lots of information on there, much more is yet to come. But get in touch with us, sign up, contact us, contact me, Ellen Briggs, at ellen@protectourpast.org. And I look forward to getting all your emails because your voice is going to help us make a difference. Our number one job is to raise money for the full-length film documentary that we are putting together to show this issue in the screens, on the small and large screens, both on Cape Cod and nationally, because this is a national issue. And we don't want to lose our history. Once it's gone, it's lost forever. Thank you so much for your time today.